August 1947. The British leave the Indian subcontinent and a line is drawn across maps, across homes, and across lives. The partition of India created two nations but left millions displaced, traumatized, and voiceless. Today, we are diving into partition literature, a body of work that captures not just the historical facts but the emotional human cost of one of the largest mass migrations in the history of humanity. Now, partition literature refers to the stories, novels, poems, and memoirs that focus on the partition of British India in 1947. But it's not just about the event itself. This kind of literature grapples with themes like identity, trauma, displacement, memory, and violence. Now, according to Pramod K. Nair, partition literature does what officially history often fails to do. It foregrounds voices of the survivors, ordinary people, especially women, children, and minorities who wore the brunt of the chaos. These are personal stories of loss and resilience, told in powerful and haunting ways. Now, before looking at the texts that belong to the partition literature, let's look at the themes in partition literature as outlined by Pramod K. Nair. The first and foremost theme is, of course, violence. During this period of time, communal riots, mass killings, and sexual violence were rampant. The texts from partition literature don't shy away from talking about this harsh reality. The next theme is displacement. During partition, over 15 million people crossed the borders, often never returning home. The partition literature that we have captures the psychological burden and trauma that came with all this uprooting. The third theme is gendered trauma. Here we look at the stories of the women who were abducted, raped, and often discarded by both the state as well as the family. In one of the last few lectures, I have talked about a book named Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, written by Christina Lamb, where she has theorized that in any kind of war, women are always used as the first and foremost battleground because of this idea that a nation's or a state's or a family's honor resides in the woman's body. So this theme dissects that idea and concept. Amrita Pritam's Pinchar becomes one of the works that dissects this theme really well. And one of the last few themes that we have is identity and nationhood. This theme raises up the question, who belongs where? And how is identity reshaped by some lines drawn on a map? These are complex questions which are explored through characters caught between religions, nations, and their loyalties. Moving on, let's talk about the works that actually define the genre of partition literature. First and foremost, we have obviously Saadat Hasan Manto's Toba Tek Singh. Now, Toba Tek Singh is arguably one of the most cited partition story. In this, a mental asylum becomes a microcosm for the insanity of partition itself. The protagonist who lives in this mental asylum towards the end goes completely insane, questioning whether his village is in India or in Pakistan. In this short story, we also see how language plays a major role in deciding or defining identity. Manto's stories are raw and deep, and I genuinely believe that any student of post-colonial literature should have a complete grasp over his stories. Some of his stories were banned as well during the time of partition. Manto had grown up in India, specifically in Bombay, and he had to move to Pakistan during partition, which made him lose his own sanity, and we lost him at a pretty young age to alcoholism because of the fact that he could not accept being in another nation, accepting his own identity in this other nation. And Manto is to this day relevant and absolutely important to read because in his stories at that point of time, he was talking about prostitutes, he was talking about people who were never actually considered a part of this society. The next book that we have is Kushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan, which shows how communal harmony breaks down in the face of violence and fear. Through multiple perspectives in this book, Singh gives us a sense of how entire villages are swallowed by hate or were swallowed by hate at the time of partition. A book that follows similar themes is Bapsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man, which is written from the perspective of a very young girl who does not belong to the Hindu community or the Muslim community, which is why she is able to provide us a third person point of view, an outsider point of view of the entire violence. In this book, we see how before partition, all of the servants, all of the house helps, and everybody in her town used to live with absolute communal harmony. Everybody used to love each other, but as soon as the nations were divided, these people who yesterday were showing their love and care for each other had suddenly turned into violent haters of each other. There is this Amir Khan and Nandita Das film also that was made on the same story, which is available to watch on YouTube, I think. The next author that we have is Amrita Pritam. A lot of her poems have actually looked at partition, and as I told, her novel Pinjar follows a Hindu girl who was abducted by a Muslim man, showing how women were reduced to symbolic battlegrounds of honor and revenge. And lastly, we have Bhisham Sahni's book, which shows the everyday bureaucratic and manipulative aspects of partition. It's about how communal riots are not always spontaneous, but often orchestrated by the people in power. Now, P.K. Nair emphasizes how these narratives aren't just retellings, they are interventions. They ask us to remember, to feel, and to question the official accounts that are provided to us by the people in power, because history is often fabricated by the people who have the power. Now, as I've talked all this while, you might be wondering that why should we read the partition stories in this day and age? Why are they important to us? Nair argues that partition literature speaks to any moment of displacement, ethnic violence, or state-led division. It reminds us of what happens when politics forgets the people. These stories push us to think about the fragility of communal harmony, the erosion of women's trauma in the historical records, and the psychological scars that survive generations. Even today, when discussions on nationalism and borders dominate headlines, these literary works offer a sobering human counterpoint. In conclusion, partition literature isn't just about the past. It's about memory, identity, and the cost of drawing lines. It reminds us that history isn't only what happened, it's about how it was lived and how it continues to echo. As Pramod K. Nair writes, literature helps us remember responsibly, and that might just be the first step towards healing. Okay, so we are going to end this lecture here. In our next lecture, we'll continue looking at some other works in post-colonial literature, or maybe something else, who knows. If you found this video insightful or helpful, please drop a like, share, or comment. And don't forget to subscribe.